Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on reconciling your bank accounts in Design Manager. My name is Brad, and I'll be hosting the demonstration today. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to enter them into the questions pane on your GoToWebinar panel. If the question is outside of the scope of today's discussion, please email them to support@designmanager.com. Lastly, if you miss a portion of the webinar or want to review any of our past discussions, go to our YouTube channel at Design Manager Inc., Design Manager INC. And here you can see a complete listing of all sorts of topics, including our quick start videos, short helpful tutorials, and comprehensive webinars, which we've categorized into our project management and accounting courses, and even all of our weekly webinars as well. Today we'll be discussing how to use the checkbook reconciliation feature in Design Manager, focusing on standard functionality, showing some convenient features, and then reviewing some common errors as well. Okay, let's get started. If you're using Design Manager to maintain your accounting and provide reporting to your accountant for taxes, one of the most important tasks is to ensure your balances are correct with your banking institutions, along with all of your accounts, quite honestly. Doing so will in turn ensure that your expenses and other purchases are recorded, along with verifying payments have been sent. Having all the expenses accounted for and purchases allows you to bill your client for reimbursables, analyze areas for high expenditures, record the proper tax liability, etc., all of which are interrelated and all of which are extremely important. The overall concept of reconciling your checking account is the exact same as reconciling your personal bank account. While many of us may no longer do so personally, it's extremely important to do so for your company, as I just explained. The process is really a matter of comparing what transactions are shown as being processed through the banking institution on the provided statement versus what's being shown in Design Manager's checkbook register. The checkbook reconciliation is all tied to entries on the checkbook window, which we can access from our accounting tab under our accounts payable frame and click checkbook and reconcile. And there we go, we can see our checkbook window. The reconciliation window shows all the entries for the selected checking account, which have a date up to and including the statement ending date, and that the entry has not yet been cleared on a prior reconciliation, which makes logical sense. Now, I have created a fictional bank statement for our discussion purposes today. Now note, some statements and banking institutions use the terms debit and credit to the account, which can be a bit confusing to indicate withdrawals and deposits respectively. Now, however, in true accounting terms, when we're dealing with checking or savings accounts, which are asset accounts on your balance sheet, debiting the account would actually increase the balance, while crediting the account will decrease the amount. So be careful with the nomenclature, as it almost seems opposite to your natural thinking. Now, really, the entire concept, how these names came about, is from the viewpoint of the bank itself. As you deposit money, they debit their assets, which is really offset by a credit to your account, because technically it's your money and they owe it back to you. Now, the opposite is true when you withdraw funds. The bank is crediting or reducing their assets while debiting your account to provide you the funds requested. So that's how the terms came about historically. Okay, that aside, to begin the reconciliation process, as I said, we go to the checkbook window, and we're going to click the Reconcile button in the top right corner. And here comes our Reconcile Cash window. Now, DM Pro Cloud will automatically select the account that we have on our checking window as the account on our Reconcile Cash window. You could certainly change it, of course, if you have multiple banking and checking accounts, as I have listed on my menu. Now, right away, we have some features available for us. First and foremost, including our History button. The History button can be used to reprint any past checkbook reconciliations that you may need to provide to your accounting professional, perhaps you wanted to keep a hard copy yourself, you can reprint one from here as well. So I could simply select my reconciliation from last month, hit the reprint button, and there we go. I can print an exact copy of the checking reconciliation from the desired account. Further from our checkbook reconciliation history window, I can actually remove past reconciliations using the delete button. Now, if I notice that there was a terrible error that I discovered and I wanted to correct it to have my reconciliation perfect, I could highlight the reconciliation and actually delete it. Now, if I notice that the error was all the way back in December of 18, I would have to delete each reconciliation in turn and then make my changes. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Okay. Once our count is already defaulted for us or we select it, we need to start entering in some additional information, and here's where we're going to be using our my fictional bank statement. The first thing we need to do is enter the statement ending date, which we can find listed right on the bank statement, 3/31. We're also going to need the statement ending balance, which again, all of your statements should show, and we have that listed here, 2548.67. 2548.67, and as I said, we can just input our bank statement ending date as well. I always like to double check my work. Perfect, we're ready to go. And we can see that my start button is highlighted, indicating that I can simply click the enter button on my keyboard, and all of those transactions are being listed for us. Again, as I just said, we're going to see all transactions that affect the checking account, either by increasing it or decreasing it. The check grid would be all payments coming out or withdrawals coming out of the account, while deposits would be the funds coming in. All of these have not been previously included on a reconciliation and have a date less than 3/31, which you can see they most certainly do. Another handy feature from the reconciliation window is sometimes your company may do a huge volume of transactions in a given month, and sitting down and doing an entire reconciliation in one day or 1 hour perhaps isn't feasible, and you may want to start the process and continue later. Well, Design Manager is automatically going to save my reconciliation date and ending balance for me. So if I had exited it out, gone to some work, come back, even shut Design Manager down, the next time I go in to start the process again, my statement ending date and balance are already loaded for me, just keeping the process as smooth and easy as possible. There's also a few ways on this window to really make finding information and sorting information quite easy. You can sort both your checks and deposits columns by nearly any of the columns themselves. I can click the check number to sort by check. I can sort in the other direction. If I wanted to jump down or search for a particular check, I can just start typing, and boom, I jump right down to check 10,016. I could also sort by payee name. If I wanted to find my curtain calls check, I can just start typing curtain calls, and I'll jump right down there as well. I could do so by date. I can even do so by amount. I could sort my deposits by a particular amount, start typing 5166, and jump right down there. So you can really quickly identify and locate transactions just by changing how you're sorting the grid at the given time. Another extremely helpful feature in the ProCloud platform is what I call the dynamic reconciliation status along the right-hand side. And as we proceed through this reconciliation process, you can watch how we can immediately see changes in the reconciliation status as we're clearing our various transactions and becoming closer to successfully completing our project of reconciling our account. Now, what does this information show? Well, if you start at the top, it shows the statement ending balance with the statement ending date coming right from what we typed in on the left-hand side. After that, we can see deposits in transit. This is the addition of all of our uncleared deposits, which currently are all of them, to that statement balance. Then we have our outstanding checks. This is a subtraction of uncleared checks and other withdrawals, leading us to our running reconciliation balance. The computer balance as of 3/31 comes right from our checkbook window. So it says 34,432.12. And if we jump over to our checking window, let's jump back, we can see, yep, as of the end of March, that is exactly the balance listed. 34,432.12 is exactly what we would match on that date as well. And then the difference is between the calculated reconciliation balance and the computer balance. Our goal is to get that reconciliation down to 0. And you can see as I select a check or a payment, by clearing it, my outstanding checks decreases. Same with our deposits. As I start clearing our deposits in transit clear as well and reduce, all of which affect the difference. So you can see how it's dynamic as we go through the process of reconciling our account. Great. Now it's just a matter of doing just that, selecting all the checks or payments and deposits that are listed on our current statement. And further, Design Manager has a few methods to make that process as fast as possible, starting with the clear options. The check mark along both the checks and the grid, the deposits grids, allows us access to the clear checks and deposits window. This is an extremely quick way to mark certain transactions or even all transactions as cleared or uncleared. Some users actually will clear all the transactions and then easily uncheck the ones that have not been cleared in the statement. So if I wanted to clear all of my checks, I could have the clear selected, type of check, type of selection is checks, click OK. You'll always be warned because you want to make sure that you don't disrupt your reconciliation. And if we click yes here, all of my payments and checks have been cleared automatically, and notice that my outstanding checks, of course, goes to 0 as well. Now, let's say that I did not actually mean to do so. Well, go back to our clear checks and deposits. I can use the unclear option, leave the type set to checks, and Design Manager will again warn me or ask me if I'm sure I want to proceed. And now all of my checks and payments are cleared, and we're back to where we were. I have other creative and more sophisticated ways of using the clear function. Back here, I could do a particular check number range. Let's say that there's 30 or 40 checks in a row that are all cleared. I could enter in that range. Let's do check 10,011 through 10,015. Click OK, and exactly those checks will be cleared for me as well. You could even use a date range. Let's say you're analyzing your statement and everything is cleared in a certain week. Well, I could go ahead and put in perhaps, let's see, 2/8 through, how about, let's say March 10th. And just like that, those particular dates will be cleared. So if I sort it by date order, we can see everything from 2/8 through 3/10 is cleared for us. Could even use at a particular amount. Let's say we're trying to find a deposit in this case of a certain amount. Let's use our 5166.45. I could type that value in, hit OK. Design Manager finds it and clears it for us. That's very handy if you have lots and lots of transactions and your eyes are just struggling to find a particular amount you're looking for. That selection will really help you out as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and begin our reconciliation with the checks or payments. And I'm going to do so manually rather than using our clear function so we can really examine the process in detail. However, let's begin with the checks themselves. Now, checks are fairly easy as they generally clear the bank in chronological order, provided that the vendor or payee deposits them in a timely manner. Really, we're just verifying the proper amount on the check. Now, when I'm doing my reconciliation, I like to actually mark the statement as I'm processing the reconciliation. And I'm going to simulate that process with the highlighter function on our PDF of our bank statement. So let's begin with the checks themselves. I can see from the reconciliation, from our statement, that check 10,011, 12, 13, 14, and 15 have all cleared, and each of the amounts match what I have. So let's go ahead, mark all of those as cleared on my statement so we can monitor our progress over there. And then on our reconcile cash window, we'll go ahead and clear each one. Now notice, as I'm doing so, Design Manager is automatically keeping track of how many payments I've cleared and the total. And again, our outstanding checks is decreasing on our dynamic reconciliation aspect. So all of this is giving you information that you can use while you're processing your reconciliation process. Now, I do have another check 10,016, but looking at the statement, that didn't clear. Well, that's the payee that we send our rent to. That's our landlord per se. And I can notice that the check from February has just cleared in March 3rd, so they take some time clearing their checks. So that's absolutely fine. I'm sure that my check 10,016 will clear on a future statement, presumably. Now, what other withdrawals do we have? Well, we can see from our statement we have $150 that was withdrew from an ATM or debit. And I can go over to our reconciliation and match that amount up, and the dates are exact 3/17, which is generally how it would work for an ATM withdrawal. And I can see that my payee indicates that I'm taking funds out to put into petty cash, which is quite common. So I'm withdrawing funds out of the checking, putting it into the petty cash account for times when cash is needed on hand for deliveries, lunches, etc. And if we look over at our checking window itself, I could see that withdrawal of the 150 in my checkbook on both my cash checking account, and I bet I'll see a deposit into our petty cash account, and I certainly do. So that matches up perfectly. We have identified our ATM debit of 150, and we'll go ahead and clear it. Next, I have a bank withdrawal of $1,500 on my statement on 3/18, and I also have 150 withdrawal on 3/18 of my reconciliation for the owner's draw. If I use my Go To button, as indicated by the green arrow, Design Manager is going to automatically display how that transaction and where that transaction was entered. In this case, we used a journal entry to represent we withdrew $1,500 out of the checking account and provided that to the owner or owners. So that's $1,500. That's reducing their owner's draw. That's basically reducing the equity in the company. Well, we've identified that. I can clear it on our reconciliation window, and we can mark it as reconciled on our statement as well. Let's see. On our statement next, we have a debit to Legacy Antiques of $2,130. On our reconcile cash window, however, we don't have a single transaction for Legacy Antiques, but we do have 3 separate transactions. Perhaps we purchased multiple pieces of merchandise that were all on separate invoices from Legacy, and as such, we entered them in Design Manager separately, but Legacy actually ran the payment for them simultaneously. So it was one payment, but we have it represented as 3 separate transactions. Here's another feature that can help us exactly in these cases. You can use the sum features to conveniently calculate the total of such charges. So watch. As we select the sum column, in this case, as opposed to the clear, if we select, click the sum on our first legacy, in our summing area, I can see I have one transaction selection and the current running balance. And as I select the second and third, our three transactions equal 2130, which is exactly what we see on our statement. And now from here, once I've summed all of my entries, I can use the clear button that marks them all as cleared very conveniently. Now, if I did that in error, I can use the unclear. So we can go ahead and clear ours, and then I can use the remove sum, which will allow me to use it again for a different set of transactions. And jump back to our statement and go ahead and mark our legacy antiques as cleared as well. Okay, now we have everything that's been entered into Design Manager has been identified and marked as cleared, again, knowing that our check for the Princeton Real Estate Group will clear next month. So let's focus our attention on deposits or funds coming in to our cash account. So first off, we can see we have a transaction of $226.79, which we have deposited on our bank statement as well. And if we look at our details button, as indicated by the binoculars, I can see the information about that transaction. In this case, it's deposit slip detail, and we can see that this was a commission check that we entered as a miscellaneous cash receipt. Great, so we can go ahead and clear and knock it off our statement as well. Oops, that was up here. There we go. Visa, we can see a deposit of $4,850.75, which we also have listed on our statement. Cayenne or Tysis is our credit card processing company, and they're depositing all of that series of transactions back on March 4th. So we can clear that as well. And again, we're also going to be, that's the deposit from our credit card processor. We'll talk about fees from them momentarily. Now next, let's see. We have a transaction of $51.6645 as a deposit on 3/18. But on 3/19, we have a deposit of only $49.91. So if my math serves me, we're off by $175.45. So now we have to do some research to see what the issue may be. Well, Design Manager has several features that make diagnosing the issue quite simple. First, let's go back to our details button, again as indicated by the binoculars, and see what transactions comprise that particular deposit. So we have a few payments from our clients, and $175.45. So the commission was either incorrectly included on a deposit slip posting in Design Manager, or perhaps it wasn't really processed yet by the bank, or maybe we just put the wrong date in there. Whatever the case may be, this particular portion of the deposit has not yet cleared the bank. So I can't clear the entire deposit itself. So we have some ways to quickly fix it. By changing either the date or deposit slip of a cash receipt, the receipt will appear as a separate entity or entry on the checkbook and reconcile tabs. So if the date of our commission check was incorrect, I could use the Go To button right from my deposit slip detail window, positions me to my cash receipt window existing tab on that exact transaction, and I could edit it and make any changes to the date or deposit slip as necessary. Now, well, what if the date is correct, but the funds simply haven't cleared the bank? Well, you can use another feature from our deposit slip detail window, and that's called the split deposit feature. This is going to quickly break out that portion of the overall deposit. Very convenient if your company accepts credit cards and you took several credit card transactions in a day. Well, perhaps only 4 out of 5 of them truly process the bank that day, and another one takes much longer for whatever reason to actually process. You can use the split deposit feature in just such a case. So if I tag our commission, we can see that the tagged sum accumulates in the bottom for us, and then hit the split button. Design Manager is going to warn me by saying the tag deposit will be split from the others. Are you sure you wish to continue? Well, we are. Now notice, just like that, the commission is off this particular deposit slip. And back on our Reconcile tab, we can see here's our original entry, and we've created a new one just for our commission of $175.45. Again, from here, if I did want to change the date, I could just jump on the Go To and change it on the cash receipt window as we already demonstrated. So now I can leave our $175.45 as uncleared, but go ahead and mark the $4,991 as cleared and mark the deposit on our bank statement as well. Okay, what's left on our deposits? We just have a large deposit at the end of the month that just simply hasn't cleared the bank yet, so that's quite okay. And we can watch our difference is getting much closer as we're reducing our outstanding checks and deposits in transits. A good time to review another feature. You can imagine if my statement is quite lengthy and all of these cleared and uncleared entries could be a bit overwhelming. Well, ProCloud has another feature that keeps the reconciliation window nice and manageable, and it's called the suppress cleared payments button. And you can see it right here. It's the list with an X. And if I click it, it's going to suppress all the cleared checks or payments that I've already reconciled. And just like that, I'm only focusing on the ones that I still have to review. I can go ahead, clear some more, and again, suppress them all. If I want to get back to showing all of the transactions, just click the clean list or show all checks, and there we go. So it allows you to go through, review a multitude of transactions, and then simply hide them from the list to make it a lot more manageable. And you have the same feature on the deposits as well, where we can hide all of the cleared transactions or reviewed transactions so far. Great. Okay, so now we've cleared all the matching transactions and made any corrections necessary so far. Next, we need to add the transactions into Design Manager that are not yet being displayed. So what do we have on our statement that we don't see in Design Manager? Well, let's first off, very commonly you may have a service charge, and we have a monthly service charge of $15. Easy. Right on our Reconcile Cash window, we can see an area for service charges, and to add or enter one, simply click the pencil button, which is Enter a Service Charge. That gets us to our service charge, Service and Finance Charges window. Conveniently, Design Manager is crafting a description for you. It's using the standard text of service and finance charges, and it's using the statement ending date for your reference. I'm going to click the plus sign because I need to do two things. I need to, one, enter that amount of $15. That's easy. But I also need to select the appropriate account. What does that mean? Well, yes, I'm going to reflect a reduction in my cash of this $15, but I need to say what was that cash for? And I have a very straightforward expense account for bank service charges. I know that it's an expense account because traditionally expenses are in the $60,000 range, and this is expense account 63,100. Now, it's very important for you to standardize the account that you're going to use for such fees. Once you've created your desired account, you want to use it each time. So have one account that represents those fees for you and just use it consistently. It'll really make all of your accounting much cleaner. Click OK, and now we can see our $15 going against my bank service charges expense account. Click OK again, and I can even see the $15 listed in the service charges area. Design Manager automatically uses the statement date of 3/31 for our service charges and clears it for me all in one quick step there. So just like that, service charges are taken care of. Next, interest. Well, this apparently is an interest-bearing checking account, so I want to record that as a deposit or funds coming in to our checking account. For that process, I could do it. The easiest way is using what we call a miscellaneous cash receipt. Quite simply, on your accounting tab, go to your cash receipts button under your accounts receivable frame. Let's put this back into last month, and we'll click the Add Miscellaneous or Add MISC button. This allows us to enter a non-project related cash receipt, basically anything not coming from a client. So we could put that on the exact day, which was 3/31. Remember, Design Manager, you just have to enter in the month and the day if it's going into the current year, and Design Manager will format that for you. Payment type, let's use cash as the payment type, even though it's not truly cash, but this will ensure that it doesn't process through undeposited funds. I can use interest as my check number, that's just fine. I might change my deposit slip to INT so I'm ensured that it's going to be listed by itself on my on our reconciliation. Name, again, can be interest, transaction description, interest for 3/19. The amount was $2.53. And again, another opportunity to input an account. This time we're increasing our cash account. Fantastic. That's one side of the transaction. The offset account is basically asking, what is the source of these funds? Oh, it's interest. So if we start typing in interest, I can see an interest revenue account. How do I know it's a revenue account? Again, traditionally, revenue accounts are in the 40,000 range, and this is a revenue account of 49,500. Further, I can always use my my search button as indicated by the magnifying glass, and I can see that indeed my interest is a revenue account. Why is it revenue? Well, there's some funds coming into your company from an outside source. That indeed would be revenue. Click OK. I could go ahead and print a journal for my records if so desired and include it in my reconciliation paperwork. Go ahead and post. And there's my interest separated out nicely on my deposits grid, and I can go ahead and clear. And we're one step closer. Okay. On 3/21, we have a transfer of $5,000. Yes, we took some funds out of our checking account and put it into our money market account and have neglected to input that information so far. No problem, quite easy. Now we can go back on our checking window and we can use the handy transfer function. This allows us to move funds between bank checking asset accounts. So we click the transfer button, which brings up our transfer cash window. Transfer money from. Where's the funds coming from? Well, they're coming from our checking account and they're going into our Bank of America money market account. This was performed on 3/21. So we can go ahead and select 3/21. Transfer is just fine as our description. Let's put our fiscal month back as well, and we'll put in the fact that it was $5,000. By clicking OK, as usual, Design Manager is going to want you to confirm the transfer, and when we click yes, we can see immediately on our cash checking account, there's our transfer of $5,000, and I imagine we'll see the same thing on our money market back in March as well. And there it is, funds coming into that account. And now we can see on our deposits, on our checks, there is our transfer. Yes, it was withdrew or taken out of our cash checking account, so it's going to be on our checks and payments grid. Clear that as well. and now the transfers are done too. Okay, lastly, on our statement, we have our credit card processing fees. Now, let's talk about that momentarily. Some credit card processors are going to have a single withdrawal for a month of transactions. So all of the fees are consolidated, and they have a single fee withdrawal automatically out of the account to which they usually deposit the funds from your clients. Now, I have a few different ways of recording this. I've seen it recorded as a negative miscellaneous cash receipt. We had our, we saw how you could do a cash receipt for our interest or commission. This would be a negative cash receipt, and you could select some credit card processing expense account. So you'd have a withdrawal of that money out of this cash checking account and reflect it into our credit card fees. Works just fine. You could also add it as another service charge. I could edit my service charges, put one in for the credit card fees against some credit card processing fees expense account. That would work work just as fine as well. My preferred method, however, is to make an operating expense using the credit card processor as my vendor. Why? Well, I can then very easily track all the expenditures to that particular credit card processor through future analysis, and I can see all of the fees as their own entries on my checks and payments grid rather than being lumped into my service charges or something along those lines. It's just going to make the statement match even more clearly. My preferred method. So how does that work? Piece of cake. Back on our accounting tab, bills and invoices, this is where all of your purchases, of course, are entered. Let's back our fiscal month up to reflect that it occurred last month. We're going to go ahead and add. This will be an expense, of course, since it's not really related to any projects. The vendor, I have one for Cayenne credit card services already entered. Invoice. March 2019 fees is just fine. This occurred on the 28th. Transaction description, again, March fees is great. Click my add button as indicated by the green plus sign, which brings us to our vendor distribution window. And conveniently, I already have a particular expense account for credit card services fees showing up for me. Why does that happen? Well, if we look at our Cayenne vendor on our vendor glossary, on my defaults tab, I associated the expense account that I always want to use with my Cayenne vendor. Another reason why I like the operating expense method, it ensures that I'm using the exact same expense account to record such fees. So I don't need to worry about tracking down that particular account. It's going to default for me. And we have our amount of $145.53. Click OK. And now I also want to put in the fact that not only did this charge occur, but it actually was taken out of my bank by using the hand check wire transfer button. I can just use the wire option, put in the same date of 3/28, and that came out of my cash account, my cash checking account, of course. Click OK, verify that everything looks just the way I want it. OK again. Check my fiscal month. I could again make a journal here as well to include my reconciliation paperwork if desired. Go ahead and post. Yes. And just like that, we can see there is my transfer on my checks or payments grid for my particular Cayenne vendor, and I can go ahead and clear. And clear it off of my statement. And for those who are quite observant, notice just by doing so, my difference is gone and I have the green light that says the bank statement balances. One quick point there about credit card fees. That's if they all take the fees out in one lump sum. Now, some processors will take their fee out directly from the deposit on each entry. So the statement so the amount that hits your bank statement is a little bit less than the cash you truly would charge the client. Now, that company, the credit card processing company, should provide you with a statement of the original deposit and the fee. So you could do the exact same thing that I just did for each of those individual transactions, and it'll match your statement exactly. One more thing about credit card fees comes up, credit card processors comes up quite often. Be aware that the date of your deposit, like our Visa example, that you have in Design Manager may be several days later on your statement, because it takes some time for the credit card processing company to deliver the funds. And as I alluded to before, the deposit may be broken into a few entries on your statement, as certain charges took longer than others, even though they're recorded on the same date, or ones that you recorded on the same date are now lumped in together, which does make our various functions of the split and split deposit slip quite handy for you as well. Just a couple notes about credit card transactions in general. Okay, so we can see that our bank statement balances. Let's take a look at our statement itself, and we can match up some of the total areas. We can see that I have 12 total payments of $13,896.03. Well, I have 12 cleared checks, let's call them, or payments, as I've had some automatic withdrawals, etc., and our amount matches perfectly. We can see our service charge broken down to $15, matches up exactly. On our deposit side, they have 3 total deposits listed at $10,068.54, but interest is broken out. Ours includes them all. Those two values match exactly. So even all of our totals match perfectly as well. So once my bank statement is set to be balancing, I'm basically done. I could print out a copy of my reconciliation report, and I could optionally show the cleared items or just the uncleared items. Here's all of the outstanding transactions, and these are all the transactions that have cleared. Very convenient to have with either saved on your computer or your network, or with your hard copy of your statement. And to truly process the reconciliation, we're going to go ahead and accept. Design Manager will always warn you that it's going to accept the reconciliation and mark all the transactions as cleared. When we click yes, now we can see back in our checking, all those transactions that we worked on are all marked as cleared. And I could even, as we saw originally, see our statement on, our reconciliation on our reconciliation history report. Great. That's the whole process of our reconciliation in Design Manager. Now, how about, those were all pretty straightforward. What about some of the common pitfalls that I've seen in my experience? Well, let's go through a few. Most commonly, things are just entered incorrectly, the wrong date, the wrong amount, etc. Just a matter of matching those up and identifying them for what Design Manager has listed versus what the bank statement does, and making the initial correction. So let's say we started another reconciliation, perhaps at the end of April. We'll just put in some fictitious balance there, and we can see some transactions that I have as examples. Let's say that this check, which was another commission check, perhaps I noticed that when I see my statement that indeed it wasn't $145.54, it was $154.54. No problem. How do we correct? Right from here, I can use my go-to. I can use our details, and our go-to gets me to my cash receipt window existing tab as we saw previously, and I can simply edit and make my change. When I do, I can see it reflected on my cash receipt window, and I can even immediately see it reflected on my reconcile cash as well. Most common, simple data entry issues. Very easy to correct most of the time. How about another? Let's say that perhaps I'm a bit behind in my reconciliations, and I've already gone into transactions of April or May in the future. And I notice that my statement for April does not have a wire transfer or an automatic payment to my computer company of $125. If we take a peek here on our details, we can see that the expense itself, oh, that was in May rather than April. So I've actually got my payment before the bill itself. Doesn't sound quite correct. So how do we fix that one? All right, we can just use our go-to button here. That jumps us right to the payment transaction in our checkbook. So I want to enter that in again properly into the May date. So here I'm going to use the void button. Design Manager is automatically going to use the current fiscal month. Click OK. What that will do, now the entry is back on our payments and checks window. So I can go ahead and enter the correct date by simply tagging and clicking the hand check button. And now we can put that correctly on the date of 5/2. Make our fiscal month match and our checking account. Now back on our reconciliation, already gone. Why? Because the date is now exceeding our 4/30 date. Very easy. Another common area is when we're selecting our cash checking account inappropriately, when we're entering in accounts like or transactions such as our operating expenses, miscellaneous cash receipt, invoice adjustments, etc. Basically, whenever you're being prompted for an account, we put in the cash account inappropriately. That's going to cause issues during the reconciliation, but the reconciliation will at least alert us to that fact. What do I mean by that? Let me do an example. Let's say we have our bill from our electric company, our monthly electric and gas, perhaps. I would enter that through our accounts payable, bills and invoices, of course. That would be an expense. Put in our energy company. Let's do April Electric. 4/21. April Electric is fine for the transaction description as well. And we click our add button to get to our vendor invoice distribution. And I have foolishly not yet put in my associated expense account with my energy company. So I say, well, what account should I use? Well, I wanted to reduce my checking. Let me use my cash account. Okay, and then let's say it's $200. Go ahead and click OK, and I can go and post. And now, over on our reconcile cash, rather than seeing a check appear, I see a deposit. Why? When you post an operating expense, you're going to credit or increase your accounts payable account, and you're going to simultaneously debit whatever account you selected in your account distribution. Well, I selected my cash account. Debiting an asset, as I said at the beginning, is going to increase it. So now I have a transaction that I can't even identify. Further, I can't even use my tools because it's simply not indicated to be as part of this reconciliation. But handily on the checkbook window, I can see that transaction and Design Manager alerts me. It says other purchasing. I know that I've selected an operating expense where I incorrectly used the cash account as the distribution account. Well, how do we fix this mess? Very easy. Just go back to your invoices for your vendor invoices, select the errant transaction, and now we can change our cash checking to our gas and electric. Much better. And now back on our reconciliation window, the deposit drops off and I can actually go and properly indicate payment for my energy bill as well. Very common. Just always think about the transaction that you're entering in, whether it's appropriate to use the cash account or not. And with that, that brings us to the end of our discussion on reconciling your checkbook in Design Manager. Reconciling your bank accounts is critical to maintaining proper accounting records. If you do so each month, all the information on the transactions is fresh in your minds, so it can be reviewed the easiest. We reviewed some of the features that really streamline the process in ProCloud and even tried to discuss some of the pitfalls to be mindful of them and how to correct them if they do occur. With that, I thank you all for joining the discussion today and hope you attend another of our free webinars in the near future. Take care and have a great day.